40 Days Through the Bible, Day 20. This was Psalms 51 through 100. And in chapter 78, it's going through the story, kind of summarizing the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. And there's a passage in here where it says, "In spite of all this, they kept on sinning. In spite of his wonders, they did not believe. So he ended their days in futility and their years in terror. Whenever God slew them, they would seek him. They eagerly turned to him again. They remembered that God was their rock, that God Most High was their Redeemer. But then they would flatter him with their mouths, lying to him with their tongues. Their hearts were not loyal to him. They were not faithful to his covenant. Yet he was merciful. He forgave their iniquities and did not destroy them. Time after time he restrained his anger and did not stir up his full wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breeze that does not return." And the idea this morning is just that we all go through these wilderness seasons, and we are all going to fail in our response in them at some point, right? We're going to grumble in our tents. We're going to continue sinning despite the things that God has done. But almost all of us, or I guess I should say almost none of us, hold a kind of correct view of what that means and what the consequences of that grumbling and of that sinning are. And so there's one group of us that just like to pretend that we can grumble in the wilderness and we can not obey God and we can be pissed off in our tents and we can get all grumpy and whatever, and that God still is obligated to bring us into our promised land. And that is 1000% not the truth. If you look in here, you see, like he says, so he ended their days in futility and their years in terror. And we don't put enough emphasis on the possibility of an outcome of, like, if you are not growing and if you are not repenting and if you are not handling this well and handling well when you don't handle it well, then there is 1000% a chance that God ends your days in futility and terror and you die out in the wilderness and you never get to enter the promised land, right? That is 100% a possibility, right? And we don't put enough emphasis on that, on the fact that you can miss out from entering the promised land. Even if you're freaking Moses, you can get kept from entering the promised land because you didn't handle the wilderness well, right? The other way that we just think incorrectly about this situation is putting so much pressure on it of well, if I ever sin, if I do anything wrong in the wilderness, if I do anything at all, God will not forgive me and I'll be banished and there's no point. I've completely lost any possibility of getting into the promised land because I failed this one time, right? And we completely discount the bottom half of this passage of, yet he was merciful and forgave their iniquities. He remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breeze that does not return. He restrained his anger. He did not stir up his full wrath. And we forget that God is a God of compassion and a God of love. And so it's not a question of, well, if you never sin and never fail and you handle this wilderness season perfectly, then God will let you into the thing, right? Because none of us are going to do that. We're all going to fail at some point. We're all going to handle it incorrectly at some point. But what we need to remember is that the consequences of doing that are very dire, right? You could end your years in futility and terror, right? But also, they are not guaranteed, because God is a God of compassion, right? And so he will restrain his anger if you turn back to him. And when you turn back to him, the key to, does God forgive you? Does the compassion of God get poured out on you? The key is that you don't flatter him with your mouth and lie with your tongue while not actually believing in your heart. It's that you actually speak what is true. You actually let him reveal the things in your heart that he wants to reveal in the wilderness season. And you bring those sincerely to him and honestly to him, and you allow him to change your heart through that. And if you do that, you can rely on his grace and his compassion to cover over the ways that you failed, because you are human. So I think that's all I have for that one. I'll see you tomorrow.